something interesting just happened, and it made me think. It made me think, you know what? This is what BYD are going to keep doing to Toyota. It's going to happen every month, month after month, year after year, until eventually, well, Toyota becomes what Nissan is today. Sounds crazy, right? It does. Sounds insane. But actually, it is the most likely, most plausible scenario if you actually have a look at both companies. Have a look at what Toyota makes today, what countries they make those cars in, what those cars actually are. Toyota's manufacturing prowess is damn impressive when it comes to making internal combustion engine cars. When it comes to making plug-in hybrids and EVs, they are many years behind their rivals. And if it's already begun today, then you can guarantee that by 2028, 2029, 2030, well, it will be irreversible. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the channel. I'm Sam Evans. You're watching the Electric Viking. Great to have you with us. Do you remember I reported last year that the Tesla Model 3 outsold the Toyota Camry for a few different months? The same thing happened with the Toyota RAV4. The Tesla Model Y in many countries has outsold the Toyota RAV4. In fact, the Toyota RAV4 was the best-selling car in the world until last year when it was overtaken by the Tesla Model Y. Now, interestingly, it's not only Tesla doing this, it's also now BYD. And BYD actually the more likely company between Tesla and BYD to actually overtake Toyota and become the largest car manufacturer in the world. In fact, I don't believe it's just likely. I believe it's a foregone conclusion. After a year on sale in Australia, BYD's electric Seal, their sedan, which to be honest, it's good, but it's definitely not class leading. For example, if you compare the technology in a BYD Seal to, say, an equivalent Zeekr 007, which is not on sale yet in Australia. But anyhow, if you compare the technology, obviously the 007 is a long, long way ahead. Charging speeds are double, efficiency is better, power is higher, software is better. My point is to say the BYD Seal is not a bad car. It's just not the best. And that's what Toyota will be facing within a few years' time, the best. And that best will continue to get better. Whereas the Toyota Camry, it's just, it's a Camry. Not much changes, right? Be honest. How much has changed in a Toyota Camry over the last 10 years? Not a lot. Here in Australia, BYD reported that they outsold the Toyota Camry in December of last year. Now, that's not the first time an EV has outsold a Toyota Camry in that segment here in Australia. The Tesla Model 3 actually outsold the Camry by a wide margin as well, with 1,732 sales. But this is the first time that BYD has outsold its Toyota counterpart. Now let's be honest, we are seeing electric cars take over the world. They are. Electrification this year was over 25%. That's a pretty big number, but the point is that by 2030, that number, many experts believe, will be at around 80 to 90%. Now, I personally believe it'll be closer to 95%, simply because it'll be cheaper to make an EV, much cheaper by then, and because of the continued improvements in battery energy density, there'll be no reason to want to buy a petrol-powered, gasoline-powered car, because range will be significantly longer than what it is today. Charging speed will be significantly faster. There'll be zero downsides and huge upsides to electrification. Batteries are lasting much longer than the life of a car. So it's actually even cheaper today to replace a battery pack than it is an engine in 95% of cars on the road. But you don't need to replace a battery pack for most EVs. That's very, very rare. So the future of electrification, the future of the global car industry, is going to trend towards EVs every year at a higher and higher rate. Now, obviously, less than 1.5% of Toyota sales in 2024 were fully electric. Toyota doesn't even have a single EV production line in the world. It has a combined production line where it makes hybrids and EVs on the same production line, but it doesn't have a single production line for EVs in the world. So it doesn't make them efficiently, and therefore, we believe, doesn't make a profit selling EVs. Maybe that's why For example, the Toyota BZ4X is so much more expensive than a Tesla Model Y and an equivalent BYD here in Australia. But we can see one clear fact here, and that is that Chinese EV manufacturers are growing their sales every single year, and that is at the expense of someone. Last year, it was at the expense of companies from Japan and Europe in China. But next year, it'll be all over the world. China is growing its EV sales. Global EV sales are growing, and 80% of EVs are manufactured in China. So that leads us to one possible conclusion here, which is we're going to see this happen more and more often. We're going to see, hang on a minute, this EV from Zeekr or Xpeng or BYD or Tesla outsold an equivalent Toyota model. And that will happen more and more frequently until we see one big reality, and that is Toyota's sales will shrink rapidly over the next 5 years. I believe that even though Toyota is selling around 10 million cars today, that figure will drop to less than 5 million by 2030. That is a huge fall. And that actually is very significant because Toyota has a huge amount of debt. In fact, Toyota has around 190 billion US dollars in debt. And that debt burden is in fact really bad. It's actually a worse debt burden than what the Volkswagen Group have because 90% of that debt is bad debt. 10% is finance debt. So around 10% of that debt is basically loans, car loans. Toyota acts as a bank and gives out loans. So 10% of that debt could be called good debt, depending on if it's paid back. But primarily it will be good debt. 90% is bad. That's a really bad ratio. Compare that ratio to Ford's ratio, the Volkswagen Group's ratio. Ford and Volkswagen Group, they have a lot of debt, but they have a much higher percentage of good debt to bad debt. So Toyota's debt is far worse than it looks. Now, that's the same problem that Nissan have found themselves in, right? Their debt is now rated at junk because banks don't believe there's a high likelihood that they can actually pay back their debt. They're paying higher interest rates as a result, and what has happened is they're closing down factories because their factories have become inefficient. They have production capacity for way more cars than they're actually selling. So even only a small shrinkage for Nissan of, say, 1 million sales a year has had a catastrophic effect to the point where they basically had to accept a takeover from Honda. Honda will essentially own the Nissan car company. I mean, they don't technically own them, but they will be running the Nissan car company. The CEO of that joint business will be from Honda. The executives will be from Honda. The same thing could happen to Toyota. I mean, if Toyota lost even only 3 million sales, 2 to 3 million sales a year, they would be in a similar situation, having to pay back enormous amounts of debt and not having the capacity to do so as their sales shrink year over year over year. Now, I know if you're a Toyota fan, this all sounds like a bunch of bullshit and I'm just making it all up, but I made up the same stuff about Nissan. Nissan fans cried and whined and said I was making it up. Well, look what happened. Thanks for watching.